The following is the exact federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press. Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The room was tense and everyone's attention was on the next witness. Before the back doors opened and Will Smith entered, the judge paused. There was no introduction or prepared statement. Will merely came forward on his own. Up until that point, he had remained mute as his name circulated through court leaks, headlines, and whispered audio recordings that were allegedly too upsetting to make public. But something had changed. Perhaps it was the gossip. Perhaps it was the betrayal by people he had once trusted. Perhaps it was hearing that tape played behind closed doors. Whatever it was, Will was hiding it. He wasn't on the stand as a famous person. Rather, he was there as a man who had seen too much and said too little. And when he started talking, the courtroom wasn't ready for what they were going to hear, because what Will had disclosed about Diddy, the parties, and the manipulation wasn't just explosive. It was a warning. The day began like any other, with the room humming with quiet conversations and the press cringing. When the side doors opened and Will Smith entered the courtroom, by himself, without an entourage, legal team, or announcement, the room changed and you could hear a pin drop. Some people assumed it was an error, while others thought it was an oversight. In their assigned rows, attorneys whispered strategies while they awaited the next scheduled witness. Diddy, who had been sneakily relaxing at the defense table, suddenly looked tense as Will walked slowly and intently, his old Fresh Prince stoicism melting away into something more raw, telling everyone that this was real. The judge raised an eyebrow, and Will went straight to the witness stand. I asked if I could speak, and the judge granted it. From that point on, the entire trial changed because what Will Smith was going to say wasn't included in any media narrative. It wasn't a social media leak, and he didn't even look at me. I wasn't asked to come here today. He said, I've kept a lot inside for a long time. I've laughed on red carpets. I've won awards. I've made films about honor and strength. But none of that can hide what I saw, what I experienced, and who made it. It had been bothering him for years, starting at a party that no one was supposed to discuss. As it happened, he turned slightly in Diddy's direction. Will Smith told the court that, like many Hollywood tales, it began with an invitation that came from a mutual acquaintance with someone I had previously worked with. They presented it as a celebration of Diddy's birthday, but it wasn't. I had been to events like that before, so I didn't question it, but as soon as Will arrived, he realized something wasn't right. It was a huge mansion in the hills, with black SUVs at the front and security everywhere. As soon as I entered, my phone was stolen. Wild, just music networking, a place where stars could relax. He was led inside, the lights were dim, the music was low and strange, ambient, rhythmic, almost hypnotic, and there were no cameras. This should have been the first red flag, but they claimed it was for privacy, to protect the guests. But it felt like something else. However, there were mirrors all around the place, giving the impression that someone was constantly observing. Will claimed that following a few drinks and some light talk, Diddy came up to him and said, "Now you're part of the family." He then grinned that smile. Wasn't warmth, it was ownership, Will stated. He thought they were going to discuss business when he followed Diddy into a back room, but what he saw shocked him to his core. Men and women performing, some of whom I recognized from movies and music, some of whom appeared too young, and others who were watching as if it were amusement, and he was laughing as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He stopped, swallowed hard, and said, "Once you're in, you're in." He continued in a steady but hollow voice, and a few days after the party, I received a blocked number. The voice said, "Hope you..." Then they hung up, and he assumed it was just a strange joke until an envelope showed up at his workplace. It was unmarked, and inside was a flash drive. I nearly didn't check, but I did, and it had video of me sitting on a couch that evening. Diddy's voice was heard behind the camera stating, "That's how we keep him." Will testified that the fear he felt at that moment was unlike anything he had ever experienced. I couldn't even recall being so out of it. Yet there I was, laughing at something I couldn't even remember. When I realized I wasn't invited to that party, he said that's when the manipulation started. I kept getting invitations to other parties, but I kept declining. And then all of a sudden, I was in talks for movie roles. People I had worked with for years stopped calling, and online rumors started that I was gay and unstable. I was aware that it was pressure and that silence was the price of peace. For years, Will remained silent, smiling in interviews and ignoring rumors while concentrating on his work. But whenever I saw a news article about someone else speaking up, Cassie, Don Richard even mentioned Meek Mill, which made me wonder why I was still silent. He looked around the courtroom and said, Diddy didn't just ruin people's careers, he made them fear telling the truth. Will's statement was what ultimately led him to appear in court. He paused, looked at the jury, and leaned nearer the microphone. He explained that everything he did felt like it had strings attached from that point on. He explained that calls would come through his agent, inviting him to events, meetings, and projects. When he said no, there would be a shift behind the scenes, and I would say no to a Diddy event, and the following week, I would learn that a project that had been greenlit was suddenly no longer greenlit. He claimed that this wasn't an isolated incident, but rather a pattern, and that he didn't need to threaten people because he had systems that handled it for him, including bloggers, producers, and people he knew who to call. He also knew how to make issues surface. Will testified about a particular incident in 2013 when he was slated for a significant worldwide campaign with a leading luxury brand. We were in the closing stages of negotiations, and I had already shot the first lookbook, when suddenly they dropped me for no apparent reason. But 2 weeks later, I received an invitation to another Diddy event. When I turned it down, the phone calls began, and rumors and gossip blogs began to post stories about me that were strangely specific and could only have been planted by someone with access. He claimed it was psychological warfare. Will told the court that he knew other celebrities going through similar things, some of whom are currently sitting silent, and others who have contracts that prevent them from speaking out. It seems like you're crazy and paranoid, but then you notice the patterns and punishments and realize you're not imagining it. He turned to Diddy and said bluntly, "You didn't just collect people, you controlled them." Everyone understood exactly what he meant. And he went beyond the manipulation to describe how some of them are afraid they'll be exposed in the same way. Diddy's influence extended beyond musicians to the very foundation of Hollywood. You couldn't enter a major stage without running into someone he helped place there. Will claimed to have once gone to a charity dinner in 2016 where powerful people from the music industry were behind the scenes. As if he were the glue holding everything together, Puff was being thanked by both politics and technology. I saw one executive from a streaming platform give him a USB drive and mutter, "Only you have the final cut." Will didn't specify what was on the drive, but he said it validated what he had feared, that Diddy was doing more than just networking. He was gatekeeping. He recounted instances in which he witnessed other public figures, rappers, and actors act strangely submissive around Diddy, as if they were attempting to maintain his favor by laughing too much and bowing to him in every conversation. I discovered that many people were his survivors, not his friends, and they will testify that he remained silent for a long time because he believed that speaking up would permanently banish him from society. However, I later realized that I had already been blackballed, but there was no formal blacklist, just a whisper of doubt and doors closing, he said. Puff didn't control the people, and the reason he remained relevant at all was because his audience and the public wouldn't let him go. He explained how, as time went on, he started to see things differently and began looking back at old footage and photos from events, press junkets, and after parties, realizing how frequently Diddy's impact was always present behind the scenes, if not physically, then in authority. Then Will said, "This is the moment that changed everything." Will's voice lowered to a deeper, quieter tone, and I remained silent for 20 years, telling myself that it wasn't happening or that it wasn't happening to me. But then he said that when he first learned that secret audio tapes were being played in court, he didn't think it was true. Then I received a call from someone I used to trust, who wasn't from the prosecution or a journalist, saying, "Will you be on one of those tapes? They played it yesterday, people are talking." He talked about how it seemed like the floor had fallen out from beneath him. I had no idea that such a recording existed, but as I came to terms was real. Everything else began to make sense. He claimed to have spent the entire night reliving recollections of the party, the blackout, the envelope, and the blocked numbers. It was all a system, and I was one of the victims. He claimed that humiliation, not fear, was the breaking point because I realized that if I remained silent, it would become my legacy, and I couldn't bear the thought that my children would see These headlines and my grandchildren might see them. He phoned the prosecution team himself, he informed the court, and I told them, I'm ready, whatever you need, whatever questions you have, I'll answer them. He looked at the jury, and this time he looked at Diddy. I wasn't just coerced, I was played, filmed, and used, with a sharper tone, and you knew exactly what you were doing. When the prosecution asked if I wanted to hear the audio, he said, I hesitated, but I knew I had to, so they played it behind closed doors. He then closed his eyes for a moment before continuing, as if getting ready to relive something he had fought to forget. Press, jury, judge, lawyers, and Will were the only people present. I heard myself laughing, but Will explained that it was a lie. I didn't sound real. He explained the audio's background, which included slow music, low voices, and the occasional cheer or shout. Then, clearly as day, I heard Diddy say something like, "That's how we break them." He claimed that it was not only embarrassing, but also horrific, noting that there is a difference between being humiliated and losing your humanity. And then, I heard my name. They were saying my name while doing things I don't even want to repeat. I never consented to being recorded. I never agreed to be a part of that. But did he record it? He kept it maybe to use, maybe just to have, Will said as his voice cracked for the first time and he looked down to compose himself. How he had panic attacks during routine interviews and how, for years, he couldn't understand why he would get sudden anxiety when certain names were mentioned. Now that I know, I was just remembering something I didn't want to remember. Will claimed that listening to the audio made him face everything. He continued, "What shocked him most wasn't what he heard, it was what I didn't remember." He turned to face the jury and remarked, "If you want to know how powerful Diddy is, ask yourselves how his manipulation, grooming, and betrayal went. When Will's testimony reached the media, it was too late for Hollywood to repair the damage. The court footage went viral before the bailiff could even issue a reset hashtag, and our Will speaks our minds. Someone like me could be silenced for 20 years and not even realize it." For the first time, the public saw Will not as a polished A-lister, but as a survivor. He added, "I knew once I spoke things would get ugly, but I didn't know how fast." He described how he lost 2 prospective brand names within 24 hours of testifying. Support from another studio that stopped promoting a movie he had already filmed, but he claimed it didn't matter because he had already lost something more valuable years prior: my voice. He claimed that the calls and texts from actors, producers, and even directors began to come in quietly, with some expressing gratitude and others warning him. Remarked, "You've made yourself radioactive." Another stated, "You don't know who you just declared war on." Will gave a few names without going into detail, claiming legal grounds, but he nodded when the prosecution inquired about specific individuals. He also stated that he thought others had dirt on him. "I know that more footage may surface after this, and they'll try to portray me as unstable and broken, but let them know that I'm not. This isn't just a Diddy problem like Kevin Hart, Meek, Mill, and Lucian Grange. This is an industry built on silence, and everyone has been trading in that currency." He told the court that he expected backlash, denials, and Diddy's legal team to claim he was fabricating the whole thing. "They will say I'm bitter. They'll say I'm covering something, but I ask you this. If I was lying, why did I wait this long? And why now? I'm here to protect the truth, not myself anymore." In his closing remarks, the judge permitted Will to address Diddy directly. He got up from the witness chair, moved a few feet closer, and gave him a look. "Sometimes the truth comes, late, but it still hits like thunder. When I have more to lose than ever," he said. "In the eye, you built an empire out of manipulation," he started. "You called it success. You called it culture. You called it love. But all you built was fear." Diddy sat there without answering, his lawyer whispering in his ear, "I saw what you did." Will didn't flinch. "To those girls, I witnessed what you did to me, heard what you said about me, and when you thought I wasn't paying attention, you broke people for sport." Then Will took something out of his pocket, an old picture of me from 2004 just before the first party, and showed it to the judge. "I haven't seen it since. If you believe that this is just about Cassie, me, or a single night in a mansion, you're missing the bigger picture. It's about a system of power that is intended to stifle the truth, and if we don't destroy it, it will continue to exist." Then he faced Diddy one final time, and you once said nobody. He went back to the stand, gathered his belongings, and left the courtroom without turning around. He sat there motionless, his fingers shaking, because for the first time in decades, he wasn't in charge of the room when Will Smith called the shots. Parties like Diddy, well, no one lies like you either. Stepped down from the witness stand, he didn't appear to be a man who had won anything. Rather, he appeared to have finally stopped running the courtroom. Even the judge appeared shaken. Some jurors had tears in their eyes, and Diddy for the first time looked like someone who had finally stopped breathing. When asked later by reporters if he felt relieved, he walked out the front of the courthouse, with his head held high but his shoulders bearing the weight of 20 years of trauma. He didn't wave or posture when he left, and it seemed like he had nothing left to say during the trial. The world was barely starting to react outside the courtroom, when he reportedly said, "Relief isn't the right word, it's just finished." Hollywood, on the other hand, entered a silent panic as executives canceled meetings, agencies halted negotiations, directors and producers who had previously praised Will Smith's phones started ringing with enquiries, and the same individuals who had previously claimed that his family was now making platitudes about their intense care and dedication to the truth. Crisis teams were called in, and PR companies sent internal memos asking clients to publicly separate themselves from any previous relationships with Mr. Combs. And although many attempted to seem as though they were surprised, the internet was already doing what it does well by bringing back old videos of Diddy rubbing elbows with well-known figures at parties where everyone appeared too awkward to be merely partying. The visitors danced around awkward questions, watched film of Will being interviewed years ago, and clearly flinching when Diddy's name was mentioned, and, most painfully, saw dozens of clips from the Fresh Prince era in which fans now claim that Will appeared to be grinning through something that upset them. Were incensed that Will had to bear this alone, incensed that the rumors had been labeled conspiracy for years, and incensed that the system had remained silent for so long, but Will didn't remain in hiding. The day following his testimony, he uploaded a single message online, a black and white picture of, "He didn't know what was coming, but he made it through," the caption said, describing himself as a young actor in 1993, standing on a movie set and grinning into the sun. There were no hashtags or name drops, only the fact that the response was immediate, garnering millions of shares, tens of thousands of comments, celebrities, activists, and "You gave us a voice." One person wrote, "If Will can speak, so can we." Ordinary people notably thanked him for his bravery, while survivors of abuse men swamped the thread with their own confessions. Rumors were circulating as Diddy's squad frantically reorganized back inside the court, that more subpoenas were being issued to executives at labels, distribution companies, and even media conglomerates in addition to musicians and assistants. Will's testimony wasn't just personal, it broke the dam, and rumors circulated that there were more tapes, not just audio but